The only time we really have is now. The past is gone. The future has not yet arrived. This is by Albert Einstein.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful quote, to be honest. Why do you think what made him, like, why did a scientist that, he didn't discover gravity, right? He's known for EMC equals MC square, which is the output of energy, I think. That's what he was known for. I think he had something to do with gravity. But I think it's curiosity, like what, like a guy like of his caliber coming up with a quote like that, why do you think he said that?
Yeah, I have to go back in Albert Einstein's mind and to think from his perspective. Time travel. If only you discovered that. But I'm not like, I mean, I can't really give it from Albert Einstein's perspective, but I presume like the real, I think what he's trying to really emphasize here is like the real moment we really have is just the current time right now, rather than being lost in the anxiety of the future and being stuck in the past of like our regrets and guilt. And especially in this day and age, right, we often have that problem where we are always stuck between, whether it's like the anxieties of the future or what could become, especially negative scenarios, which are based off our mistakes of the past. And so we're always tied between the past and the future, but we're never really in the present. And I think what he's also trying to really imply is that fulfillment and contentment is only experienced in the present. It's not experienced by you dreaming about the future, and it's not experienced by you being tired by your past. And that could include not even just mistakes, how you were in the past as well, like your identity and things that you used to have but now are gone, and now in the present you're different. So I think he's really trying to emphasize this current present moment is the real moment where you can capitalize on and you can seek fulfillment, contentment, and really just have is where you would maximize or like is the place to focus on, I would say. Yeah.
I think it's also, if I were to comment as to why he came up with that quote, I would probably say that he was quite close to like time dilation and like the general concept of time. He was quite familiar with that, right? And, I think if you think about it, a lot of people think about, if I could time travel, or if I could go to this place, or if I want to be here. But could it have also been the perspective of that's all imaginary in your brain, and the only time you can experience, or the only time you can experience is now? Could that, like, do you think that could have also been a part of his like thought process for that?
Yeah.
With a guy like knowing so much about time dilation, how time works, like, why the whole concept of space. I'm not too familiar with all the terms, but to then come out and say it's actually about now. No matter all this time dilation, no matter how far into the future you can travel, how much back you want to go, like, it's all about now. It's interesting you say that, because I think there was a quote that 90% of our suffering comes from things that have never happened, which is insane, which is true. Like 90% of the times we worry about problems that we haven't even faced yet, or we haven't even put our mind into doing, or we haven't even put the effort into doing in the present moment. We're just so focused on the consequences of those problems or what's going to happen, but you don't put the energy into doing it now. So it's so powerful, because like everyone's suffering is based on things that have never happened or will not happen.
And it's just like how we said the other day, which is like fear is false evidence appearing real. And I feel like majority of our thoughts, right, of the things that we worry about the future is based upon fear. And how, as you said, like most of it, if we actually had our thoughts on paper and we looked at it, right, we would think like, when we actually rationally sit down and think about it, it's like, the probability of these happening is like 0.1%. But yet we act in such a way that it has a 80 or 90% chance of happening. But yet the things we never really even thought about or considered about the things that actually end up happening. It's black swan, or it could be the opposite. But it's interesting that you say that. And it is, I think, like with Albert Einstein, who did, I would say, focus a lot on time, because he was looking at general relativity And I think he also, sort of gave a theory of wormholes probably existing, but obviously it hasn't been proven yet. But wormhole is like, I think, the distortion of space and time, something like that, where you go through like a different dimension. I can't exactly remember, but it's never really been completely discovered. But he was also, I think, emphasized a bit more on like black holes and that existing. But his main emphasis was really general relativity. That's where a lot of time and stuff sort of comes from. So
I'm gonna find what his theory is here, because this is gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think a lot of people, our suffering comes from fear. But I think another thing is we push too much emphasis on our past dictating what our future will look like. You know, that's also one of the reasons. You know, if for example, I can't actually really think of the perfect example here, but it's like, let's say in a soccer match, football match, 2 years ago, you had to take a penalty, you missed it, right? And you've cost your country the World Cup, right? Big deal. 4 years later, you're in that same position again. Or you think about yourself in that position, you think, I could never do it. Like, I can't put myself through that, you know? But what if you can? You know, like, if we look at famous sports stars of our time, like for example, Lionel Messi lost the World Cup in 2014, which was, you know, everyone wants Messi to win a World Cup. 8 years later, comes back and wins the World Cup. You know, I think at that point in time, he would have probably, and then he retired as well after losing the Copa America. So I think there's a reference point in everyone's life at some point, is that whatever's happened in the past, either it makes you better and it prepares you to overcome those problems or hurdles in the future, or you can let it consume you and you can forget about living day to day, because your whole focus is just on the future. Like, you're focusing on something that hasn't even happened. And the most shocking thing is that you probably don't know what's going to happen in the next minute. Like, you could collapse right in the next minute, have some sort of seizure, cardiac arrest, whatever it is. Like, you don't know. Or a brain aneurysm. Like, you know, so we place too much emphasis on things that have not happened. But it's natural, right?
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think yeah, it is quite natural, and we sometimes are quite it's crazy. Like, if we actually sat down and looked at our timeline and we looked at how much did I think of things that just didn't end up happening, like how much time did I waste looking at the past, or like being stuck on the past, or things that already have happened, and just thinking about the future being based off that, and how much time did I spend actually living in the present. And I think, like, when you look at it from that perspective, it really changed your perception of like how you use your time and what you do with it, especially. And I think a lot of it is also hinted in your language. You say, I worry about this happening, or I'm worried that this will happen. Oh, so that means you're basing something off the past that you haven't actually let go of, or you haven't overcome, of it dictating what the future might be. Or if you say, I'm anxious of this happening, like I'm anxious of making a mistake in this meeting, or I'm anxious of this job role or something like that, then that's obviously you're worried about the future. And then I think, like, it's even in your language, it's very important to understand that distinction and where that's really coming from. Sometimes you can't help it. Like, it's just a natural emotional reaction. You're going to feel nervous in doing a speech in front of thousands of people. But you see, it's depending on the language you use. If you say I'm stressed is like in the present, because you experience stress in the current situation right now. But when you say I'm worried, then you're basing something off the past. And if you say I'm anxious, then you're worried about something about the future, or you're concerned about something in the future that hasn't happened yet. And when you make that distinction in your language, then you start to realize, oh, I'm anxious, but the chances of that happening is very low. So maybe I shouldn't emphasize as much time or stress on my energy into thinking that it could go wrong. And if it's like, oh, if it's in the past and it's like, oh, these are things that have already happened, maybe I should spend a bit more time to understand why I feel like this or why my narrative is like this of myself. And if you're stressing the present, that's like, hey, that's good. You're actually in the present. You're living in the present. So I think that's how you can distinguish between, am I stuck in the past, future, or am I in the present? It's a very subtle distinction.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Yeah, using language, like self-soothing language, self-nurturing language that helps your frame of mind at any point is so important. Like the language, how you speak to yourself in the language you use. Yeah, you're right. It would literally dictate how you feel.
And where you are at that
where
time.
you are at the time, yeah. It's quite interesting. It's like it's responsible for so much mental health issues as well. And if we take a step back, like there's this whole like grind mentality as well, people, right? And so if you're, let's say, not on the grind mentality, you are worried that your future is not secure, for example. Like you might look at someone on Instagram that's made it, right? And you aspire to be like them one day in the future. But each day, instead of living in the moment of thinking of ways how I can get there, your whole thought process is based around not working on the present or not working on the things you should be in the present to get to that moment. It's just idolizing that moment. And I think Instagram, like that's what social media shows, right? Is sort of the end journey of things. We've spoken about it many times, but it shows it's a reflection of someone's, like, that could be a reflection of someone's future. And what I mean by that is you might post a successful photo, for example, and you might think that that's your present. For someone else, that's their future. And so their whole being worried about not being able to make it to that level, not being able to get to that point, not being able to ever succeed at that level is already distorted because they haven't put the work in at the present time. So sometimes like your present is someone else's future. And if that someone else doesn't actually think about like, I just need to act on things now so I can get to that level in the future, that's where a lot of suffering comes from as well. That's why you see like body dysmorphia now, such a big deal. Like guys wanting to be super jacked, like, you know, people wanting to take steroids or whatever, for whatever reason, or girls seeing other girls, you know, be whatever it is, like relationships or girls out or whatever. Like I can't really comment exactly. I'm not in social media. It's probably the best thing I've done. But like that's what the suffering is. It's self-inflicted. And you never actually think about what can I do in the present moment to get there. It's all about, oh, that's what the future is. Future. And before you know it, like, you're dead. Like, and how many times do you hear of people like, you know, oh yeah, like people that want to retire, that people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to retire and then travel the world. Right? Like how many people are like, yes, I'll work 45 years of my life. I'll save up all this money. And then when I'm 65, I'll retire and I'll go travel the world then. And sadly, like, and it's not everyone, but you hear about it. It's so sad. Like there was one guy that, I've heard of, like he was ready to retire within like a month, and he was driving home from Newcastle and he was hit by a car, head-on collision in the countryside, and passed. Someone else like they get sick or they have a heart attack or something and they pass. Like everything they've worked for was for their future and then gone. You know.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. And that's the thing, like, I do like what you were trying to emphasize on, and it actually made me think of something else, which is like, we place conditions, right? And I do this as well. I notice this as well, and I actually notice this is like a flaw of myself, where we always place conditions in order, for example, to be content or happy or fulfilled. Like, oh, only until I get to this status or like until I get to this following, then I will be free. Or until I get to this amount of money, then I will travel. Until I get this job role, I will travel. I'll do this. Until I get married, I will look for a house. Like, we're placing off conditions of things that, are basically probable. Like, it might not have made it. It's like you're basing a very key decision, especially like, for example, happiness, like being content, based on something that may not even happen. And what happens if it doesn't happen? And I think that's what really restricts us living in the present, because we're always thinking about, we're always relying on hope. We always hope that it will happen, and then that's when I'll start to react and start to do whatever I need to do. But why not just? And I think that's the flaw we have. Like, we place conditions, and I think it's because of social media. Like, once I get to this status of wealth, once I get to this job role, once I get to this age, then I will start to go get married or whatever it is, or then I'll start to travel. But there's no such rules like that in life. There's no such thing as like, once I get to this, it's self-inflicted. And that's because of social media and many other, probably cultural or many other reasons. But I think that's what actually restricts us from freedom. We're actually placing our own lock, or we're putting ourselves in our own jail by placing conditions for such things. Obviously, sometimes you need to consider, like, if you're going to buy a house, something, am I in the financial position to be able to afford it? That's different from saying, once I get married, then I'll look for a house. There's no such thing as that law or rule existing. You've created that in yourself. And, that can be like 10 years later. But if you're in a financial position to do it, you might it's up to you. But what I'm trying to say is, like, we're always placing conditions. And I think that's what makes us less content, less fulfilled, and makes us very anxious about the future. And because we place these conditions as well, if we don't fulfill it, then that becomes a mistake or an example in the past which actually ties us down even further, thinking that our future is unlikely to occur like the way we want it to be. And that's why we're never in the present, because we're always stuck about conditions. And I think that's what the real problem really is these days. Conditions.
Yeah.
You just why not act now? Like, if you're in the position to do it, and if you have the ability to think about it, why not act now? Why wait? Or it's like, even the best example I can give is like, anyone starting a business, anyone starting a podcast, anyone starting anything. Once I get like this setup, studio setup, once I get this amount of money, once I get this amount of followers, or once I learn, you know what the biggest one is? Once I learn these skills, like, as in, once I finish this course of video editing and programming and coding and developing websites, and you create a whole curriculum of 10 years of like a degree, and then you'll do it. It's like, no, that's the fastest way to learn doing something is just by taking action as soon as possible.
That's what we did.
Exactly.
we failed so bad at the start. But yeah, you're right.
100%.
100%. That's such an interesting perspective, because it's so true. Like, a lot of people place these ridiculous conditions on themselves, and it's betting on something that's not even going to happen. You're sort of gambling on something. Like, put it this way, right? When you gamble, there's two outcomes. It either happens or it doesn't happen, right? If either team A wins or team A loses, right? But imagine gambling on a condition that could have so many different outcomes. You could be walking, you could be hit by a car. You could land, like, you could fall and hit your head. You could find the woman of your dreams. You could in a moment lose everything that you've loved. You could put a child in a woman in a moment, right? Like, again, it's such different. It's like, life is endless outcomes, but everyone's so like, a lot of people don't like the idea of gambling, right? But you're sort of gambling on infinite outcomes. And when you're gambling on infinite outcomes, like, how do you know what's going to happen? There's no, and it's interesting, because when I was younger and I first started my job, like, in the company I had this full plan in my mind of what I wanted to do, like, full plan, right? I was like, yep, this is my part-time job. I want to finish like uni. Once I finish uni, I want to do like a grad program and then go into X, Y, and Z, and then, just stick to this, move up say a corporate ladder, whatever it is, right? Like that was sort of the plan. Like how further from the truth was I? You know what I mean? Like haven't graduated uni yet, and I'm not ashamed to say that at all. But like the whole, like betting on those outcomes, like none of that happened.
But I was gonna say, would you say you're in a better situation than you would have ever imagined
100%.
from the plan?
Yep.
There you go.
110%. 110%. Like things worked out for a lot better rather than placing all these conditions on myself. I think that's what I did. I didn't do. Like I slowly got out of the mindset of stop placing conditions. Like I placed this condition that I should graduate uni before I progress in my career in different roles. And the only thing that was holding me back was like, oh, I might not get hired because I don't have a uni degree. But there were so many other skills, experiences that was valued over not having that, right? But it's made me think now, like, all those conditions were things I was placing on myself. They weren't being placed by someone else. Like, if you're applying for a grad role, different, right? Like, the prerequisite is you need a degree. But when you're applying for internal hire related roles, like, it is preferable, but like, there's other things that you could really sell yourself on and things that you can bring value on. So I think the moment I removed those conditions on myself and I went, you know what, screw it. Like, I'm just going to focus on networking, building good relationships with people, working hard, learning the right skills, learning the right values, learning about the company, learning about people, expanding my mind on things. That's when like real growth came, you know, and then in the way, like a lot of adversity as well, you know, being made like redundant twice, like, but then there was no point at like I put place conditions. It was like whatever happens, happens. And right now, like, so I'm quite blessed with that because the opportunities I've been given, stuff that I'm currently working on, it's a big deal. Like I enjoy it, but it's interesting you say, I think that's what I was getting to, but yeah, you summarized it perfectly.
It's very powerful, especially like how you were able to especially get over like the redundancy part, because that could have been a point in your life where you've been like, that could have consumed a lot of your time, because you could have been stuck in that time and you could have doubted yourself and you just could have settled for a lot less with compared to where you are currently because of the fact that you feel like you're incompetent. But the fact that you're able to overcome that says a lot. And I think like that sort of, if anything, sort of helped propel you to where you are currently. And I presume you're obviously more content with the qualities and traits and things that you've absorbed currently.
I mean, it's the people that I get to work with as well. It's quite incredible. You know, like one day I'd like to speak about it more when I can. But like you learn like what good leadership is. You learn like being like, you know, being able to, like I had a current leader tell me like a good product person is someone that's a T. You know everything about everything, but you know the depths of everything as well.
Yeah, T-shaped skill.
T-shaped skill. Like you need to be able to explain anything at any point in good detail. And I learned this like a few weeks ago, like that sort of mindset. And it's like, okay. And now like when it comes to learning new things, it's really deeply questioning rather than taking it at a surface level. It's really going in and understanding, and it's helped a lot. But that's just like one thing. But yeah, I mean, getting like opportunities like that you learn so much from people. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, definitely.